to preserve institutional integrity of the deep state, so that
preserve the institutional integrity of the deep state. That's the mission of the Council on Foreign Relations, which we've covered on so many of these streams. Preserve the institutional integrity of the deep state. How do we do that?
So that the deep state can save us.
At a Council on Foreign Relations panel discussion reflecting on post-Soviet Russia and America today, one of the questions was how we can preserve the deep state so it can save us. Remember last week we went over John McLaughlin, the acting director of the CIA and deputy director of the CIA under George Bush, saying, "Thank God for the deep state impeaching Trump."
The impeachment inquiry is underway, sparked by a complaint from someone within the intelligence community. It feeds the president's concern and often used term about a deep state being there to take him out.
Thank God for the deep state.
Look at this bio. Former CIA acting director and CIA deputy director.
I'm a fellow here at the council. I want to introduce a term that...
What do you say the name was? Steve Sasanovich?
Sasanovich, I'm a fellow here.
I'm going to see if I can find this guy.
I want to introduce a term that we used a lot in talking about Russia in the 90s, and that's power ministries. The deep state in Russia was a set of institutions inherited from the Soviet Union that were easy for Putin to control. Well, easy might exaggerate a little bit, but he had a natural advantage from the inside out in gaining control over Russian life, politics, economics, everything.
A natural advantage over who? He was the president of the country, the democratically elected president of the country. I mean, just again, you guys know, how many times have I said, they always go back to 1990s Russia, the moment when we almost had Eurasia, when Boris Yeltsin was our puppet and George Soros and the Harvard Endowment were carving up all of the state-held assets and selling it off to themselves and their friends. So even this title, reflecting on post-Soviet Russia and America today, they're looking back on how we lost Eurasia. We had it. We were so close. But then Putin took it away from us. And he had this natural advantage because, oh yeah, he was the president of the country. He had this advantage over us because there were these institutions. We had a deep state inside Russia. We covered this in our Harvard streams, all the Russian oligarchs that the State Department and Harvard and Soros were working with. We resisted that for so long, but at the end of the day, Putin overcame our control over Russia. Well, are they a sovereign country or not? Council on Foreign Relations. Just pay attention to the framing. It presupposes that there is no national sovereignty. And how do we come the natural advantage of a president elected by the people exerting more control over its government than the Council on Foreign Relations as outsiders? All right, let's keep going.
In the American case, you're talking about institutions, the intelligence agencies, the law enforcement agencies, the military, that the insurgent authoritarians don't have a natural control over, an inherent.
The things that the insurgent authoritarian, you mean the democratically elected president? How funny is that he says the intelligence state, which is part of the executive branch under control of the president, and the defense sector, again, part of the executive branch, where he is the commander-in-chief. But they're saying this because they know, because they, at CFR, highly influence, work with, and at times outright control the intelligence states in foreign countries. We go around setting up the intelligence states in countries. We set up the intelligence state in Pakistan, which under its hybrid governance basically has an entire separate governance structure for the defense and intelligence apparatus that is used to control internal politics. Same thing in Ukraine. Remember the New York Times article where Ukraine was, 2 days after the Maidan coup in 2014? the CIA came in and took control of the entire intelligence state in Ukraine. So it didn't matter who became the president in Ukraine, whether it was Yatsenyuk or Poroshenko or Zelensky. None of them controlled their own defense and intelligence state. The donor drafter class from the Council on Foreign Relations and their friends did.
Inherited control over, but in fact have to gain control of them from the outside, because in fact gaining and doing so seems prima facie illegitimate.
What do you mean? They're part of the executive branch. What, do they have a mind of their own? There's just a permanent class in Washington that gets to do whatever it wants, regardless of how the people vote. That's what he's insinuating. And of course, that's what we mean by the deep state, the permanent unelected political power class. And he's saying, we lost it in the 90s with Putin when the corrupt oligarchs under our control fell under Putin. How do we stop our corrupt oligarchs and our corrupt kleptocrats here in D.C. from falling under the control of Trump?
Illegal, even. Whereas Putin didn't have that obstacle. So I wonder whether I could get the panelists to talk a little bit about what it depends on to preserve institutional integrity of the deep state, so that
preserve the institutional integrity of the deep state. That's the mission of the Council on Foreign Relations, which we've covered on so many of these streams. Preserve the institutional integrity of the deep state. How do we do that?
So that the deep state can save us.
Why, don't worry, friend. According to the New York Times, the deep state doesn't exist. So it can't be destroyed. Don't you worry. The deep state will be perfectly fine with us. Why, you're a conspiracy theory for even voicing this question. How amazing. This is the Council on Foreign Relations.
You know? I mean, that's my fantasy.
Angela, do you have any thoughts on that?
Having, for a short time, been part of the deep state. I mean, so clearly, one of the problems is.
Now, remember, Hillary Clinton, we went over Hillary Clinton's speech at the Council on Foreign Relations, where she said, "Thank you for opening a D.C. office so I don't need to travel all the way to New York to be told what to do." That's the Council on Foreign Relations.
Is if a president comes along, or Doge, or whatever, and starts to try it, which is what they're trying to do, to dismantle this, and fires you, you have limited recourse. And again, I mean, you can get together with your colleagues, you can push back, you can file lawsuits. I mean, you can still do that in this country. But, you know, one of the things that has been quite remarkable is the speed with which so much of this has happened since January the 20th.
Let's go. We didn't expect them to be so high integrity so fast. We didn't expect them to clean up our corruption so fast. We can normally gum up this process.
And then it's also the appointment of people to head some of the deep state institutions, particularly the intelligence agencies.
The problem is Trump is moving quickly and he appointed good people. His cabinet picks, Marco Rubio, Tulsi Gabbard. I'll reserve my opinion about John Ratcliffe until I meet him. I don't know exactly what to think about Ratcliffe. I think he was good on Russiagate stuff. I'm not sure. But how funny is that? And the problem is we normally get the Republican side of the Senate to block anyone good to run the intelligence agencies.
And then the people whom they hire. And there's a limit to what anyone else can do to push back against that. So They haven't dismantled the deep state yet, the beneficial aspects of the deep state, but it's happening much faster than maybe many of us would have believed before January the 20th.
They're like, damn, if we had known that he was going to hire good people and move so fast, we would have gotten a second shooter besides just Matthew Thomas Crooks.